Good morning, sir.
Very good morning to you.
Sir, do you need to present it once, like share the screen and see?
Okay, sure.
Okay, sir.
Is that visible, Dr. Deepa?
Sir, it's visible, sir. PPT is visible, sir.
Great.
Sir, we'll be starting shortly. Participants are joining in.
No problem. We start at
Okay,
10.
sir. Okay, sir.
somebody guiding the flow of music. It was Thomas Hobbes, way back in 1651, who in his book Leviathan actually proposed the very idea that we could have automata or machines that move themselves. And he then goes on to say that our life, the human body itself, is but a motion of limbs, and therefore it should be possible to have an artificial life. It is for this very reason that George Dyson, the science historian, actually recognizes Thomas Hobbes as the patriarch of artificial intelligence. For he was the one who really introduced the idea of artificial life or machines that could be considered intelligent. It was Leonardo da Vinci who conceived the idea of humanoids or humanoid robots. Nobody knows that whether Leonardo da Vinci or his associates could build these machines. But then this was really impetus for others to take this out. To cut a long story short, I would just point to three important events in the history of robotics over the years that has brought to what we are today. One was about the story of a neuroscientist, Gray Walter, who in 1948 thought of making machines that could move on its own, and most important, these machines were supposed to emulate the functions of the brain. These machines, popularly called the tortoise and named Elmer and Elsie, were a marvel of the day. Gray Walter had made this at a time when we had only basic analog circuits, vacuum tubes, and all that he had for sensing was a touch and light sensor. But most interestingly, these machines had the ability to go to the nearest charging station if their batteries were running out. This I consider to be a very important moment in the history of robotics and call it the significant moment number 2. Now, as you can see, if I call this moment number 2, there must be something in the history of robotics which have changed the field more aggressively than this early confluence of neuroscience, AI, and robotics. And it was the introduction of the Unimate robot by General Motors, who was the first company to install a robot in the industrial sector. In fact, a robot for the first time. And Unimation Inc. was the first robotics company. This is significant moment number 1 in the history of robotics. But what lay ahead for robotics was much more interesting and exciting than what the dreamers must have dreamt of. It was in 1970s, late 1960s and early 70s, that at Stanford Research Institute, people worked on bringing AI and robotics together and created Shaky, the first artificially intelligent robot. Shaky was a robot that could reason on its own. It had camera, laser range finders, radio link, and it had the ability to make decisions. But then, given the computational power at that time, it took a long time to make decisions. And when it finally moved, it would vigorously shake. And therefore, it was called shaky. Nevertheless, this was a very important moment in the history of robotics. Now, these technologies, as they were emerging, the ultimate goal, even today, for robotics research is creation of machines that can reach or even go beyond the human levels of perception, and they must be able to follow our cycle of action. Now, as a human, what do we do when we operate? In a very rudimentary metaphor, I can say, it is we sense, we plan, and we act. So if we have SPA, that works for us. And every robot that I want to be intelligent needs to have the sensing ability, S, the planning ability or the ability to reason, that's P, and then act. So that's the ultimate goal. Sensing, as you know, is a technology that's growing very fast. We have sensors now being made of nano, micro, nano materials. And that is pushing in a big way the revolution of Internet of Things. But together with it, we must have the ability of perception. Together with the ability of perception, we must have the ability of reasoning, decision making, and then acting. Reasoning, decision making comes from the idea of AI. Artificial intelligence, or AI as it's called more popularly, is demonstrated whenever I can do a task that requires the ability to learn, reason, and solve. So if a machine can do a task that requires the ability to learn, reason, and solve problems, then I say the machine to be intelligent. It was Alan Turing, way back in 1950, who published his landmark paper called Computing Machineries and Intelligence. And in that paper, he speculated about the possibility of creating machines with intelligence. Now, he was possibly one of the first who recognized that intelligence, the term itself, is difficult to define, and therefore devised his famous Turing test, which is about interacting with a human and a machine across a blindfolded wall. That means you are interacting to a machine and a man on the other side of the wall. You do not know who is answering your queries. And if you cannot make a distinction between the man and the machine, because they are giving equal levels of answers to your query, then the machine has passed the Turing test. Over all these years, with all the progress that we have made, till now we do not have a machine that has cleared an unrestricted Turing test. And that is where we stand, even after some 70 years of Turing's paper on computing machinery and intelligence. He did write about the very fact that for being intelligent, one needs to think. And he starts his paper by saying, I propose to consider the question, can machines think? And goes on to define what is thinking and what does it mean to be an intelligent machine. It was not until McCarthy and his contemporaries, Marvin Minsky, Alan Newell, Herbert Simon, who all had come together, and it was in a conference organized by McCarthy in 1956 called the Dartmouth Summer Research Project, where McCarthy first coined the term artificial intelligence. McCarthy is referred to as the father of AI. But then remember, it is Hobbes who is the patriarch, because he was one who introduced the very idea that we could have artificial life. Nevertheless, what McCarthy and his contemporaries did was path-breaking for AI, for they introduced the conjecture that any process of reasoning could be well enough, so very nicely formulated in terms of mathematical formulations or symbolic formulations, that you could give it to a computer to really work on it and get to the answer. So this idea that reasoning process, or the very fact that intelligent reasoning happens, is manipulation of symbols, and that process could be simulated by a computer, was path-breaking. And this set the ball rolling for artificial intelligence in a big way. This type of intelligence, where you talk of manipulating symbols to go to an answer, is referred to as symbolic AI. And definitely McCarthy is one of the pillars of introducing this area to AI. Now, I would not go deep into that, but what I would emphasize is that given their idea that you could have intelligence mechanized, they also realize that any form of intelligence requires knowledge. And for a machine, if it needs to really have knowledge, then the machine should have ability to explore the world. So finally, it again boils down to having the ability to perceive or sense. And the machine should be able to the machine should have the ability to acquire the requisite knowledge on their own. This push forward the agenda of machine learning. That is, this learning that a machine can do, knowledge would acquire through that process of learning. And machine need to have this ability. Machine learning, therefore, can be seen as a subset of artificial intelligence and focuses on the ability of machines to learn. And when I say learn for machines, what I mean is change algorithms as they have more information about what they are processing. This is nothing new. It was way back in 1959 that Arthur Samuel, working for IBM, had pioneered the field of computer gaming, and he coined the term machine learning in his paper called Some Studies in Machine Learning Using the Game of Checkers. The story is interesting for the very fact that IBM was in the verge of bankruptcy. They were not able to sell their computers, the P500s, and they called on Arthur to really look at what could be done. Arthur Samuel devised a computer program that could play a game of checkers. not only play a game of checkers, but learn from the play. And this learning that the program could do, given more number of games that it played, was so better and so exciting that author in the abstract of his paper wrote that the program of checkers could play better checker than the programmer who wrote the program. And this set the ball rolling for machine learning. So it was Thomas Mitchell who introduced the formal definition of machine learning. So according to Mitchell, a computer program is said to learn from experience E with respect to some task T given to it if its performance measure P goes up with its experience E. What it means in simple terms is that given a task T, if I give you a lot of experience of that task, that's E, and if that makes your P go up, then you are a learning program. And in the context of checkers, if you see this definition, T is the task of playing checkers, and as someone plays checkers with that program, that's E, playing practice games against the program itself. And if the percentage of games won against the opponent increases, that's P improves, then the program is said to be intelligent. And the checker playing program put forward by Arthur Sermel could do exactly that, and therefore it was considered to be the first machine learning program. Now, this improvement in machine learning and the very fact that there was improvement in computing, robotics, pushed us to building models that are not only good and useful approximation of the data, but they could learn as you expose it to more data. And when I say learn here, I mean change their algorithms. So if you now look at traditional programming vis-a-vis machine learning, one should really see how beautiful machine learning has pushed traditional programming forward. In traditional programming, you have data in a program and you expect output to come out. In machine learning, you have data and output. So that's the experience. And you want the model to be developed. So the program here refers to the model. You take that model and put it into your traditional program, and you get a set of outputs. This output, you can take it back to your machine learning program, put it here to get a better model. What I am trying to emphasize by this intertwining of the traditional programming and machine learning is that you cannot see traditional programming and machine learning as two watertight compartments. It is one that pushes the other forward. And with that realization, you should look at artificial intelligence being put to real world problem solving. Not by giving up anything and everything that you know about it in terms of traditional programming and just falling on and jumping in to this magic hype being created of machine learning. It is for us, let me repeat it, in spite of being boring, it is for us as engineers, as educators, to really separate out the hope from the hype that these technologies hold for us. Machine learning is a method of data analysis that automates analytical model building. And if you look at other programmings that you have done in traditional programming and the type of programming that you are expected to do, one should really realize that machine learning primarily focuses on cognitive learning capabilities. So it should be really trying to model human function and intelligence and use data to simulate the human learning. I will now end up this small introduction to AI, ML, and robotics and try to really wind it up by this diagram here, where I want to re-emphasize that AI is the superset, ML is a subset of AI, and within ML, we are looking for really brain-inspired solution frameworks. One of them, which is very popular, is artificial neural networks that many of us know. Deep learning, a new system, is about getting multiple layers of ANN together. But what is more interesting for me, as from being neuroscience, biomimicking neuroscience, is the idea of spiking neural networks, which, given our current computational capabilities, is not taking the front seat. But it is more exciting than artificial neural networks and actually more closely mimics the natural neural networks. What is different from artificial neural networks is that in spiking neural networks, in addition to the neuronal and synaptic states that we model in ANN, we incorporate the concept of time into their operating model. And that makes them far better emulators of the human neuronal structure. Deep learning, which is being pushed in a big way, is about using deep architectures of learning or hierarchical learning approaches using ANNs, and has possibly taken the field of AI very far. But the worry is that in this process, we have narrowed down the very aim of AI. As the founders of AI would have loved to see artificial intelligence recreating an artificial life or recreating the human reasoning process, that general AI has been lost. Machine learning has narrowed down the scope of AI, and what we are exploring today is a narrow AI paradigm. Nevertheless, what has happened is we have made enough progress, and with sensors and computing, together with communication being there, we have created a connected world, and we are heading towards an idea where everything would be connected and integrated. So as Timothy Chow in his book called Precision, Principles, Practice, and Solutions for the Internet of Things, tries to see the future where every machine would definitely be parts of gears, electronics, and all, but that would not be all. It would also be an integrated collection of sensors, actuators connected by software. And this is what would be the future. So we would have a simple car. Here is a simple car, which, surprise of surprises, have more than 500 sensors, not standing alone, but all connected together. You have front-looking camera in front of the rear view mirror. You have radar that sits below the nose cone. You have ultrasonic sensors providing 360-degree vision for about 5 meters. To add to this, you have communication links, linking this information and supplementing it by information from the GPS. This is Model S from Tesla, and it's Elon Musk loves to call it, this is a computer on wheels, a very sophisticated computer on wheels. And that is where we are heading. Given this, that we are heading towards an connected world, we are heading towards things which has its genesis on sensors, all these sensors coming together, and then via communication channels making it available to us to take the right amount of information at the right amount of time. The hope is that this would lead to what is called precision engineering. And with that hope, we begin our talk on robotic neurorehabilitation. The idea of using artificial intelligence in the context of healthcare, particularly rehabilitation. But just to give you a broad view, I would love to see first, I would love to do an overview of how AI is used in the context of healthcare. And thereafter, I would focus on neurorehabilitation. So artificial intelligence in the concept of healthcare explores machine learning and other applications of machine learning and AI, such as natural language processing, computer vision. Now the focus, as I was talking to you, is on a narrow AI. That is, we are really looking for specific application rather than the grandeur hopes of a general AI which accomplishes any task a human can do. So one caveat that needs to be really remembered is that whenever we are talking of AI in the context of healthcare, in the context of agriculture, in the context of Industry 4.0, we need to really remember that here AI is not going to replace the human intellect. It is about augmenting the human intellect. And therefore, I want to re-emphasize that the focus of AI is very narrow. It's designed for specific application, and it is designed to augment or increase efficiency of our own intellectual levels, rather than really replace any task a human can do. So AI in the context of healthcare is not one technology, but rather a collection of technologies that includes ideas from machine learning, ideas from robotics, ideas from symbolic AI, and ideas from connectionist AI. So sorry about it, I did not introduce the term connectionist AI. I should have done it the moment I talked of neural networks and spiking neural networks. These ideas of recreating artificial intelligence system actually looks at the connections of the brain and try to recreate them artificially. So that area of AI which tries to emulate the connections of the neurons in the brain is referred to as connectionist AI. In contrast to what McCarthy and others had proposed of manipulating symbols to get intelligent behavior, which is referred to as symbolic AI. So most of these technologies have immediate relevance to healthcare. And if you look at the slide now shown on your screens, I'm talking of different domains of artificial intelligence that could either be looked at as methods that have been applied to healthcare or applications that have made inroads into healthcare. Methods involve things like evolutionary computing, expert systems, fuzzy systems, machine learning, deep learning, probabilistic methods. Things like Bayesian networks or Markov decision processes. Whereas application wise, we have done a lot of things in predictive analytics, in vision, in robotics, in planning and scheduling, and natural language processing. So the particular domains of AI that are relevant to healthcare is the following. ANN has been used in a big way. I'll talk of this in a minute. Machine learning and deep learning. We have had rule-based expert systems, predictive analytics, working in a large number of AI applications for healthcare. What I am rather interested in is physical robots or robot process automations that have made inroads into healthcare, particularly into neurorehabilitation. So if you look at AI and automation in healthcare, automation is not a new concept. Robots have been really laboring away in either labs or in operation theaters for quite some time now, starting in 1980s. What has changed is the increase in computing power and the size of computational elements becoming smaller and smaller. We have improved accessibility of AI and automation. And this improved accessibility has brought it with technologies into the mainstream. And possibly we are looking for more affordable systems that are easier to work with. So intelligent automation is what we are looking at. And that means that automation has been combined with artificial intelligence capabilities. And these coming together, this synergy has amplified their values. And AI has extended the automation just beyond repetitive tasks into very complex areas where human input is to be augmented with AI-driven insights and intelligent support. And this has been happening in process automation, in AI-driven technologies, and in integration. So if you look at AI and automation in healthcare, particularly AI and robotics, then this has influenced 8 different areas. One is about keeping well. That is percolated so much that many of you may be wearing smart bands today, even to this class, to count at the end of the day how many steps you have taken or how much calories you have burned. These are offshoots of AI research, particularly offshoots of robotics and AI confluence. Early detection, diagnosis, decision making has been impacted in a great way by coming together of AI and robotics. End of life care and treatment is what is more interesting. For robotics and AI, together with the confluence of what I love to call the sense, plan, act cycle being automated, has brought in a large number of change to the way we now administer treatment protocols and take care of quality of life for people with terminal diseases. Research and training is another area, but that's something we may not be talking of today in great deal. So, use of AI and Internet of Medical Things in consumer health applications, proactive management of healthy lifestyles, this has become part of our life. And they do provide better advice. And this is going to increase. Mobile phones have started giving you how much you have been working every day, or there are health bends that are coming that even tries to monitor your heartbeat. So things of this nature are there. What is exciting is in the area of early detection. AI is already being used to detect diseases. Possibly one of the most exciting one of them is the deep learning model by MIT's Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. These deep learning model for early detection was trained on mammograms, and excitingly the model can predict if someone is going to develop breast cancer. 31% as compared to only 18% by experts. And this shows that an AI system outperforms the experience of the most experienced person by almost 12 to 13%. This is where lies the use of AI, for augmenting our abilities, not for replacing them. Diagnosis has been a focus of AI systems since the 1970s. Initially they were just rule-based systems, but these systems could not be scaled up, and they were poorly integrated with clinical workflows. So now we are trying to look for diagnosis based on deep learning systems. One of them, the most popular, is IBM's Watson, which uses cognitive technology. Then we have Google's DeepMind Health, which is also trying to solve world health, healthcare problems, combining machine learning and systems neuroscience. What is more important is that all of these technologies are bringing predictive analytics, pattern recognition, all under one roof to make real-world decisions faster, more efficient, and try to augment the abilities of the healthcare worker. In terms of treatment, this is where I would love to spend some time. Better coordinate care plans. Complex surgical robots have been helping human surgeons to execute operations. Intelligent assistive systems for rehabilitation, particularly neurorehabilitation, has been making great strides in the last 5 to 10 years. And we have systems like the automated patient monitoring, which works on an Internet of Things. Now, what it literally means is that every component that's being monitored traditionally by a nurse for a patient is now being monitored through sensors, and through identification technologies, like every sensor has an identifier associated with it. That sensing is being communicated, and then some processes in the cloud make sense out of this and try to really make services available. So one company called Sensium Vitals is the world leader here, and many patient monitoring systems have been put in place. This is one area which AI and automation had changed in the real world. What has also changed in the real world because of advances in AI, robotics, and automation is the way operations are conducted. In traditional operations, it was about mental registration, remembering what to do for a particular patient. In most of the sophisticated surgery now, it's about multimodal data integration and virtually running the complete operation in front of your eyes. So as the surgeon can do it better. And then there is again the replacement of the surgeon through a surgical robot. So the world leader in this area is a company called Da Vinci, which have surgical robots. And these robots can do more accurate slicing than the best of the human surgeons. And this presence of robots in the operating theaters is going to expand rapidly, driven by technical improvements and lower cost. And they are also going to be controlled more remotely. And they are, with AI and robotics coming together, possibly going to get autonomous. Robots also have the potential to revolutionize end-of-life care, that is, enable people to remain independent, carry out activities of daily living. And this is advancing with humanoid designs in robots, enabling social interaction skills. So as robots have moved from industries to service applications, engineers were looking for new tasks that could be automated. And one task that really fit in to this idea of taking and or improving the quality of life for patients was the idea of doing motor rehabilitation through robots. So motor rehabilitation is when a patient is given exercise or is asked to perform limb motions thousands of times, and the therapist need to physically support and guide such movement. Replacement of this through a rehabilitation robot to guide and support the limb not only was a relief for the therapist, but also a boon for the patient, because now the robot could decide to give the minimum amount required for retention of residual skills of that particular patient. And that give birth to the idea of rehabilitation robotics. Rehabilitation robots physically support and guide a patient's limb during motor therapy. But then one needs to remember that these robots require sophisticated control algorithms. And to be autonomous, artificial intelligence systems driving these controls. And this is what I shall be talking in the next 1 hour. So if you look at the human brain, you have the motor cortex, the area here that controls the voluntary muscles. Neural processes, such as those that underlie the generation of arm movement, are thought to rely on distributed networks throughout the cortical and subcortical brain areas. Studies in human largely confirm the broad connections between this primary motor cortex and other cortical areas by the extensive white matter connections and strong functional interactions. Now, the primary motor cortex and the supplementary motor areas, they contain a subset of neurons that target spinal motor neurons. And through this corticospinal neurons, these corticospinal neurons, though these are distributed throughout the cortex, about half of them resides in the motor area itself. The functional significance of these organizations is that this area is uniquely specialized to drive fine motor control, such as control of your fingers or complex four-limb movements and many other parameters associated with movement. Therefore, any injury to this severely impairs movement relative to any other area. And Therefore, we need to look at ways to overcome this when that happens. That idea of overcoming circuits that has been lost is the idea that drives neurorehabilitation. So neurorehabilitation is a complex medical process, but the idea is to aid recovery from nervous system injury. And that can be made possible by minimizing or compensating any functional alterations. And this would then facilitate that people with neurological disorders can still have a very good quality of life. Now, to understand this, let us take a minute to look at the brain neurons and the synapses. The core component of the nervous system is the neuron or the nerve cell. And then these nerve cells, they are electrically excitable cells, and they process and transmit information by electrochemical signaling. What is exciting here is not the neuron itself, but the connections between them. Each neuron in turn is connected to about 10,000 other neurons, and some 1,000 trillion synaptic connections. So if you look at the neuron, a typical neuron consists of a cell body here, and it has dendrites and a long single axon. Now, the soma or the cell body is usually compact. The axon and the dendrites are like filaments that extrudes from the soma. And the dendrites typically branch profusely and extend a few hundred micrometers from the soma. This neuron, as already told to you, is an electrically excitable cell, and they communicate with each other via these specialized connections, which are called synapses, the connections between the dendrites of one and these axonal synaptic vessels from the other. So if you look at the neural circuitry is a population of neurons interconnected by synapses to carry out a specific function when activated. Now, neural circuitry interconnected to one another forms this large-scale brain network that I am now showing on your screens. These brain networks get disturbed if you have a neuronal disease or by stroke or other disabling diseases. And it is this neuronal circuitries that we want to recreate by really giving an exercise reason or some amount of mental processes that we call motor imagery to the sufferer. So neuroplasticity is about the brain's ability to reorganize itself or to get new neuronal connections throughout life. Neurorehabilitation, the very foundation of it, lies in neuroplasticity. That is, the ability for neurons in the brain to compensate for injury and disease, and then adjust their activities in response to new situations or changes in the environment. The idea is that the brain circuitry that I have shown you a little while ago, if any of these connections get disturbed, there are two ways of restoring connections. You go inside the brain and really put these connections back, or you really use those parts where the connection loss has affected. Try to really work on these parts so that the message that goes back from this part to the brain makes new connections to be developed. Both of them is tried. There are people who goes inside the brain and tries to create artificial L connections using things like silk threads. That's another area of research, but this is invasive. The non-invasive neurorehabilitation attempts is about really using robotics to give regimes of exercise and mental exercise and physical exercise so as to restore these connections in the brain. So robotic neurorehabilitation is about using innovative robotic technologies which help the neurorehabilitation process. And here when I say robotic technology, I mean things as rudimentary as mechatronic devices or as complex as a humanoid robot, but all of these with certain degree of intelligence so as to optimize and speed up or slow down the regime of exercise depending on the sensory motor recovery. So that's something that needs to be taken care of when someone is trying to really work on using robotics for rehabilitation. So biomedical robotic technologies, if you really want to call it that way, is experiencing a huge development in several health domains, as I have highlighted before, wellness, as prevention, but robotics has made the best contribution in rehabilitation treatment and age-related sensory motor decay. Now, thanks to these technological advances, such robots are mechatronic devices and they are equipped with powerful processing units which are able to exploit real-time information on the human component. Because I said they have to optimize or speed up or slow down. So they really need to do real-time information processing on the human component, and this would enable patient-tailored assistance during the exercise to be performed. In most advanced cases, these robotic machines allow real-time tailoring of each exercise, of the whole therapy on the basis of users' residual abilities and real-time assessment of human performance. This is what makes AI and machine learning so important for these devices, because without AI and ML coming in, you cannot do what I have been emphasizing in the last few minutes about monitoring or optimizing the assistance level so as to really have patient-tailored assistance. Now, the rationale for these robot-aided neurorehabilitation is grounded, as I had told you before, on this relatively new evidence that physical exercise and spatially action-related movements promote functional recovery. And robotic machines for motor therapy therefore play a fundamental role and promote the recovery of brain areas. Now, here are a couple of devices that have been used over the years, and these robotic machines for motor therapy have been playing fundamental role in rehabilitation, promoting recoveries of brain areas devoted to high-level motor control. In A, we have Locomot, which is an exoskeleton robot to manipulate patients' hip and knee. In B, we have the Gait Trainer, and in C, we have again another great trainer, which are, I will come in a minute, which are actually end effector robots, meaning they only try to move the distal ends of the kinematic chain. And in D, we have a robot for the wrist and the forearm. And here we have a robot for the shoulder and the elbow. And in the final picture on F, we are showing Amido. That's a manipulator that tries to move your individual fingers. So these robots have been put to practice in a number of universities across the globe, and many of them have been put into clinical practice. But what is exciting is that all of them are either end effector devices or exoskeletons. So when I talk of robotic neurorehabilitation, and robotic devices fall into two groups: the end effector devices and the exoskeleton. End effector devices are one which have a specific interface, and they actually constrain the distal part of the human limb. They do not control the whole kinematic chain. Whereas exoskeletons exactly reproduce the kinematics of the human limb and support its movement. So in terms of arm rehabilitation shown here, that's end effector, and the leg rehabilitation locomod shown here is an end effector, because here the idea is to move the final end, the leg at the bottom, the toes, and here the hand at the end of the kinematic chain. Whereas if you look at the exoskeletons recreate the complete kinematic chain and support whole of it. So on your right is the exoskeleton of a human hand. On your left is the exoskeleton of a human hand, and on your right is the exoskeleton for the lower limb. These support the complete kinematic chain, starting from here, the wrist, to the final distal ends of the finger, or from here starting at the hip to almost the toe. So in terms of actuations and control, exoskeletons could be either passive or active, and they could be controlled either through impedance, admittance, or triggered control. And in terms of driving them or actuation, it could be electrical, pneumatic, or hydraulic actuation. Now, there are a number of interesting steps in which a particular person interested in developing a human and aid of neurorehabilitation could be working. In this context, researchers need to consider several important aspects for implementing the particular steps of having not only the exoskeleton or the end effector device, but also putting in sensors, putting in control, putting in a human interface. So one aspect that's very important is related to the goal of intended therapy. So robots should therefore emphasize motor activities and exercise to create functional recovery. And therefore, these functional recovery pathways should be grounded on voluntary movements as part of the action-related task. And this should be driven by the actuators. So that portion is coming from the voluntary. Another aspect to take into account is the combination of the sensory motor and the biomechanical approaches, and we should be able to reduce abnormal motor response. So we should be able to really having a control and supervision unit that's looking at control and supervisory capabilities. and then taking a decision. So here is a very conceptual and high level diagram of the control, and this is why I call it the high level control structures that you really need to have. So here is a conceptual control diagram on the interaction between the robot for rehabilitation and the human body. So as shown here, the motion control in the human body can be simplified as a feedback loop where the brain plays the role of the controller for the human motions. So the brain controls the muscles to follow in a desired motion pattern, and the control output from the brain is coming to the motor, and this is sent to the muscles via the motor control signal. The muscles produce a joint torque, and then the input, that is the human motion intention to the robot, can be extracted from the human robot interface, okay, and then through the force sensors it can reach the muscle related signal. The robot's controller can then really understand how much is to be delivered, and by that amount the human muscular system is excited. And in other words, what is happening is the human body is then actuated by a sum of what is coming from the robot and what is coming from the brain. This additional assistance that the actuators give complements the inability of persons with loss of neuromuscular control to really control his musculoskeletal system. And this enables the movement of the limbs in spite of the brain signals being very low. This is what is the conceptual control diagram of a exoskeleton, which would be controlled based on human inputs and also the feedback from the real movement. Now, what we mean by high level here, and that's very important because I call the slides the high level control strategies. So high level here means the aspect of control algorithms that are explicitly designed to provoke motor plasticity or neuroplasticity, if you understand the word that I was introducing a little while ago. Recreating networks in the brain that has been lost. So if I am talking of strategies explicitly designed to provoke such things, I call them high-level control structures. Controlling the electronics or the the low-level electronics or the mechanical systems is the traditional control. So for many robots, such high-level control algorithms are supported by low-level controllers. So these low-level controllers would achieve force control, position control, impedance control, admittance control necessary to implement this high-level algorithms. And research in robotic therapy devices has actually advanced the state of art in low-level force control. Okay? Because we need to really do the low-level control in slightly different way. We may not be able to completely copy the traditional controls of PD, PID, or some other traditional control schemes. So here we are grouping the current control algorithms according to the strategy that they take to provoke neuroplasticity. You could assist the person, and that assistance can make him do exercises so as he gets at his neuroplasticity, or he gets newer motor circuits developed. So that's one assistance. Challenge based is one where you challenge the person and he tries a difficult task than his capabilities to make the motor circuitries grow. Simulating is about really putting things in a place and trying to really understand how to get this circuits back. Non-contact coaching is about humanoid robots coming in and telling you what to do. So when I'm talking of assistive control strategies, it could be impedance-based control, counterbalance control, EMG-based assistance, performance-based adaptive assistance. And when I'm talking of challenge-based control algorithms, it is mostly resistive, constraint-induced, and error amplification. So we will look at this one after another. But one thing that needs to be clear here is the most developed of paradigms of these four is the assistive controllers. Assistive controllers help participants to move their weakened limbs in desired patterns during things such as grasping, reaching, or walking. And it is a strategy which is like active assistance performed by the rehabilitation therapist. Challenge-based controllers, on the other hand, refer to controllers that are in some way the opposite of assistive controllers. They make movement tasks more difficult and challenging. So these type of controllers would provide resistance to the participant's limb movement during exercise and require specific patterns of force generation. The third paradigm, which is haptics simulation strategies, refer to the practice of activities of daily living in a virtual environment. And you create a virtual environment for him to take a glass of water, or actually all you're giving him is feeling of touch. And such movements in virtual environment and can recreate the motor circuitry. This is also something that's growing very fast. These all have one aim, and the aim is to put the motor circuitries that have been lost in the brain back. So assistive control strategies, there are a number of examples of robot therapy devices being used by different types of assist control algorithms. Here I have shown a couple of examples. We have in A and B two of the very first devices to undergo clinical trial. The one in A is the MIT Manus, which really went clinical trials in a big way and was one of the most interesting developments. In B, we have Locomot, which I have shown a little while ago. This is about our leg rehabilitation. And then we have this robot here called Heward. It is a hand robot, and the user gets assistance. And that means he follows some free movement and for a fixed time. And if he's doing something wrong, he gets triggered assistance. So he's asked to correct by sending him a trigger. And the one here in D is interesting. That's called T-Rex. And it is one of these that use passive gravity balancing effect to actually provide assistance. And at F, we have a real-time computer model of the participant, helping the participant to provide feedback forward assistance with compliant and position control alert for him to make movements. So these are some control strategies is of the assistive control type that has been used for taking forward rehabilitation robots that have entered clinical practice. Let us now look at each of them one after another. the impedance-based assistance, that's what I told, is when the participants move along a desired trajectory, the robot does not intervene. But as soon as the participant deviates, the robot creates a restoring force, which is some mechanical impedance. So the first robotic therapy controllers were just proportional feedback position controllers. But then, and people realize that this is not correct. So more recent controllers have more or sophisticated form of mechanical impedances, like stiffness, as like viscous force fields, like virtual objects that come in and disturb or assist in achieving the desired motion, or creating user-defined mechanical limits for complex postural or locomotor movements, and have been brought into place. And these is promote, as I have been repeating, what is called assistance as needed. So the impedance control, the goal is to define the desired impedance force or impedance between a desired input position and the actuator force. So it consists of our force control loop, as you can see, and an outer position control loop with a position sensor telling us where we have reached, and the measured position is used as an input by an impedance control or containing the desired impedance parameters in the form of Z sub D here, and the impedance control generates a desired force, and the desired force together with the actual kinematic and the desired force with the actual kinematic trajectory that I have to generate, and is used to control the robot in this inner force control loop. And as a result, the robot executes what it wants and applies an assistive force. Or the issue of impedance control is related to high performance requirement of the inner force loop, and depending on the coupled system dynamics, a low gain for the force control can cause inferior performance. This is also used for assist as needed strategies. Now, the admittance control loop, on the other hand, generates a trajectory in a feedback loop, but the admittance control is one that has a position loop in the inner loop, whereas a force control loop in the outer way. So the huge advantage of this admittance control is its robustness, thanks to the inner position control loop. And the objective of the outer loop is to modify the force position relation as required. If you look at it as a function of time, you could have different modes of assistance. One where you are assisting continuously. So you can see in the graphs below, continuous assistance time starts at the same time and it carries on, whereas the time of activation for time triggered assistance is that it is after a particular amount of time it triggers, whereas activity triggered assistance is about when things do not happen as desired, and then an robot assistance starts, whereas in pulse assistance the patient voluntary activity continues. You give assistance after a certain amount of time, and you keep on giving it. In challenge-based assistance, and this is interesting, the patient voluntary activity is more than what assistance is provided. And in the challenge-based, the patient needs to exert a force which is generally higher in magnitude than that exerted by the robot. And he creates his neural circuitries by taking challenges. So that's very important. Now, we are looking at now the performance-based adaptation, and it is very important that one realizes that when I'm talking of neuromotor recovery, it is about regulation of task difficulty. So it is about looking at task and really trying to understand where the tasks are happening so that you really have to take these tasks forward. So in terms of performance-based assistance, we have sensing of the human abilities through EMG, or at times EEG, that is the brain signals or the muscle signals, and then we provide assistance based on if I am reaching the desired performance or not. And the resulting performance that I have influences both the motor functions as well as the muscular functions. So it influences the motor control system through the sensory system, and the robot in turn can modify the amount of assistance provided and the properties of the motor tasks. So this is possibly one of the best ways to take forward neurorehabilitation. Now, as you can see, it depends on a lot of signal processing and machine learning abilities to be incorporated into the control scheme. One of the most likely things here in such control schemes, which are performance based, is about using the physiological control of EMG signals. So physiological signals can be used to avoid slacking and provide robotic assistance. Traditional control concepts have been extended for human motion intention during the robotic training. EMG signals, which are recorded from selected muscles, have been used as indicators of some training pattern. Here in this diagram, what you see is the motor cortex sending signals via the spinal cord and then coming to the muscles of your hand. You have the extensor digitorum muscle, the flexor digitorum muscle, flexor carpi ulnaris muscle, and you take signals from this muscle to understand what type of movement by the hand is going to be performed. Do a machine learning. Here we are doing a classification task, and you acquire this signal, you do feature extraction, and you classify using a support vector machine to really understand what type of motion is this person trying to do from whatever signals of the muscles that I get. And then this is converted and sent to the robot to really take this motion forward. So one needs to remember that while such type of physiological signals like the EMG have been widely used, there are some challenges in reliability and accurately collecting EMG signals. These signals are very sensitive to electrode placement, interference from neighboring muscle signals, and skin properties. So, and most important, this time the brain takes to respond is only 100 to 200 milliseconds. The spinal cord takes around another 300 milliseconds. So total you have 230 milliseconds before your next signal comes. Okay, so around 300 milliseconds is what you have. Out of that, 250 milliseconds is already gone in acquisition. So you really need to understand how to grasp or do things in the remaining 50 milliseconds. And that's a challenging task. Okay. And that is what makes using EMG signals very, very difficult. Hello, Deepa, Dr. Deepa, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, my time continues up to 12 or is it 11:30?
Sir, we have till 12.
Great, great.
Yes.
I have some more things to tell them. Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah. So I can continue another 30 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Great. So that's what myogram is. And therefore, people have thought of directly using signals from the brain and looked at brain activity monitoring for neurorehabilitation. So here is the typical brain slice. You have the brain cortex and then the subdural space, the skull, and then comes the scalp. You can take readings from as invasive from the brain cortex to the subdural space, from the scalp itself, and also remain contactless by taking MRIs or fMRIs. EEG of them is the most popular because it's non-invasive and gives you enough spatiotemporal resolution. So in terms of spatiotemporal resolution and invasiveness, you could see as you go invasive, you really get good spatiotemporal resolution. But the risk is, as you go invasive, you disturb more neuronal circuits than creating, possibly, if you do not do with expert guidance, and therefore it is safe to remain non-invasive. In terms of remaining non-invasive, you get what is called the electroencephalogram. And the primary source of electroencephalogram signal is the synchronized synaptic activity in population of the cortical muscles that I have on the surface of the brain. So it is important that we look at the physiological control signal of EEG, and such systems have become very popular because of the very fact that brain-computer technologies could be developed just from signals that I gather from the scalp. And these signals are then used for EEG triggered assistance. What is EEG triggered assistance? EEG triggered assistance is about using BCI technologies, or what are called brain-computer interfaces, by extracting neurophysiological signals, as I was discussing the EEG, to control robotic devices. Now, the scientific interest in using BCI is corroborated by the fact that they can be used even in the earliest phases of stroke recovery, when the injured human upper limb is not able to infer movement intentions to guide the robotic training. Such person still retains the ability to generate EEGs, and you can then take EEG rather than peripheral biosignals such as the EMG to really understand what his intentions are. So EEG is a better trigger than EMG. So for EEG triggered assistance, we have to look at the confluence of robotics, of artificial intelligence, and machine learning. It is a computer-based system that acquires brain signals. Depending on what type of resolution you want, you try to go either invasive or non-invasive, and then translate these signals into commands that are then relayed to output devices. And these output devices then need to have control circuitries that are usually two-layered or could be even three-layered structures, where the lower layer is about controlling the hardware, the electronics. The middle layer is about a mediator that tries to control the lower layer and tries to mediate with signals arriving from the human body. And the upper layer is about the human interaction. So this translation that I show here is what is machine learning. The rest of it is real robotics. So specific regions, as I was discussing in the very beginning of my talk on neurorehabilitation, that specific regions of the brain are responsible. And these regions, the motor cortex, is responsible for motor planning. And then if I am talking of EEG activity, I can realize increased EEG activity in this region as soon as the person does motor imagery. So one should realize this difference between motor imagery and motor movement. Motor movement requires that the signal travels from the brain via the spine to the particular muscles activating that portion of the limb. Whereas motor imagery is about just thinking about moving these limbs without really movement happening. So motor imagery can be used in early phases of stroke, so that the person just emerges without even making a movement of the limbs to really understand that imagination and the signal triggering the robotic device. So the triggering assistance is about the rehabilitation robot detecting increased activity, activating the assistance, and then leading to significantly better rehabilitation outcome. This, in a recent paper, has come out to be more effective than just being done with simple robotic devices. So just physical activity, if you compare, and if you compare somebody doing physical activity together with motor imagery control, the recovery of the neural circuitry in the later case is far greater. This also brings to force the possibility or the ability of machine learning and signal processing of restoring the natural feedback. That is, till now in my talk, I was looking at the brain as an active controller, sending signals and trying to understand what is to be done. The robotic device trying to understand what is to be done. But in a twist to the story, you can also use the brain as a sensor, in which case you use the robotic device to send signals back to the somatosensory system through the sensory receptors available to us. Then the signal travels back via the sensory neuron, reaches the cerebral cortex, and you could make sense of what you have just now touched. But that would require that we have the retention of this sensory link. So the sensory link is there, and a person can feel senses, then the robotic devices can send this sensing sense through haptics, and that could travel back to the brain, restoring the natural feedback, completing in the process the complete cycle of brain driving the robotic device, and the robotic device is sending sensing signals back directly to the brain. So that would then reduce the control systems that I have shown to be just one loop rather than two, one the robotic loop and one the brain loop being different and intertwined. It could be a single loop controlling the system. So motor imagery EEGs like alpha, beta, and mu rhythms are very, very important, because these are the rhythms that reduce amplitude or increase amplitude with mental activity, or diminish with movement or intention of movement. So if you look at alpha, you could see that its amplitude goes down as you think of moving your hand. Beta is another rhythm that you can look for in the brain signals that would increase amplitude during intense mental activity. Mu, on the other hand, will diminish as soon as a person moves or makes an intention of movement. And this could be the signals that can be selectively extracted from the EEG to understand what is that the subject wants to do. We have done such motor imagery studies from scalp EEG readings in our lab, and we have used a lot of people asking to hold glasses, pick up tablets from a box, or pinch a bit of salt, or fist his hand, and we have looked at ways and means of capturing that. So that's pretty simple. But what is more interesting, and what we have looked at more interestingly, is that when you do such activity, you are not doing any physical activity. Remember, you are just imagining that you are holding a glass of water. You are imagining that you are taking a pinch of salt and putting it on your salad. You are fisting a hand. You are just imagining. These imaginations also give you a lot of mental fatigue. And this is something that is a huge area of study today. That does motor imagery causes fatigue as physical exercises would do? If it does, then it would be very important for us to make rehabilitation devices that would be adaptive. But what is now standard is putting the physiological signals of EEG and EMG together. So that is called the EEG-EMG hybrid adaptive control. So in most of these devices that I have shown you earlier, today the algorithms work by looking at the EEG, the motor imagery stuff, that what is he imagining, and also collecting signals from EMG, that is motor function tasks, and trying to really make sense of both of them together using a superior control. So I said, and it will have a two-layered control. The local control controls the hardware and gets the sensory reading back from the hardware. The superior control has a mediator who really looks at what type of manual control needs to be done, or what type of adaptation needs to be done. Because I told you, somebody can get exhausted and may not give you the correct signals in his motor imagination as well. So what type of adaptation needs to be done so as we can have a EEG-EMG hybrid adaptive control. The EEG for every likely EMG generated is already a very interesting thing called the corticomuscular coupling. We try to understand that coupling between the EEG and EMG and try to really do this. But then there is other modes of adaptation and manual control. That given his EMG coming out very low, then the whole control is taken up by the machine. The idea is to make the neural circuits grow as fast as it could. So prolonged motor imagery induces mental fatigue that I told you, and therefore you have to really monitor fatigue while performing motor imagery, leading to some form of adaptive controller. We use what is called kernel partial least square based monitoring, which is a regression method. So we use kernel partial least square maximum relevant and minimum redundant feature vectors, and then we really look at what are their kernel partial least square coefficients, and then we estimate the growth of fatigue, analyze the effect of mental fatigue on motor imagery, and try to take action. This gives us the idea of how much fatigue is developed over time and how much adaptation we need to do. So here on your screens, I have shown some idea of the relation between imagination of movement and fatigue. So I told you a little while ago, it's about alpha, theta, mu, or even delta that grows as you motor imagine. But then if you see at the first run, the dark reds are very less. As you go towards the last run, the darkness of red increases, saying that you have maximum fatigue at that point of time. So the topographic maps of the EEG that you have been shown here clearly shows that motor imagery leads to mental fatigue, and that interrelationship is a very important matter to be understood for really devising adaptive BCIs that could adapt itself. So we use unsupervised machine learning or unsupervised adaptive method to update our feature extraction system, and we then really update the spatial filter to really get to a more interesting classification of the EEG under our mental fatigue. So here what I have in front of you is the traditional CSP for a given task, as it is trying to tell me how much of the electrical signals have been generated. But then if I adapt it because of fatigue, how much was lost and how much is going down, as I do fatigue adaptation, and I could see the large signal that's being generated. So this adaptation of the feature extraction, adaptation because of mental fatigue, gives me a better characterization of using EEG as a signal to control my devices. Remember, I had EMG, the electromyogram signal, but these signals were very weak for people in stroke. So I was falling back on EEG, where I could get some signals. But then as I do a lot of training on these EEG signals, I ask you to imagine things. You get fatigue and your signal goes down. So we are doing a fatigue adjustment, and we are adapting the signal to see as if the fatigue was not there, how would the signal look like. And that is what is shown on the right here. And we see that without fatigue, the signal would be brilliant and you could control things. So we could then design what is called a adaptive collaborative control. It is about not only adaptation, but it is also about collaboration between the human being and the robot. How is the collaboration happening? The brain no longer is just an actor telling you to act. It is also a sensor telling you how much the human being is getting tired or excited about what you are doing. So this mediator here then tries to mediate and really understands how much of the things can be passed to the human to take over control and how much of it should be still retained by the robot, so as I do not harm the patient that is being given some neurotraining. So this system, the adaptive collaborative control, is something that ensures AAM, assistance as needed, and is the turning point for its application in clinical practice, because it does one of the most brilliant things that neurologists emphasize on: the idea of retaining residual skills of people who have lost their ability to move hands or legs. So the moment somebody loses his ability to move his limbs, we think we are very kind to him and try to help him in the best possible way. In the process, what we end up doing is making him lose whatever residual skills he had. This happens if you have a parent who is suffering from Parkinson's, if his hand is suffering from tremors, you tend to give him everything very near, or you tend to hold the glass for him, but then in the process, he loses the residual skills that was there. Retention of residual skills is very important, and therefore we need to have right amount of assistance at the right time in the right direction. And this is what is the idea of precision engineering, if you remember Timothy Chow and Elon Musk's car. And that possibility can be there when we put a lot of sensors together, a lot of sensors making sense of what is that they are sensing through ML and AI algorithms. And that is what is the future. Now, finally, I will make 2 comments and end my talk. We have seen that there has been numerous efforts for neurorehabilitation through advances in controls and robotics. I have covered a couple of them here today, this morning, and tried to emphasize to you the advances in AI and ML, which have really pushed forward assistive control. And this has also been taken forward through adaptation based on psychological responses. But if you come back to me and ask, how many of this has really been used in the clinician's room, or how many of them has really cleared clinical practice? The answer would be a very few. Why is that? Clinical practice of these ideas is not taking a huge step as we would have expected it to. This is primarily because still people look at AI and ML as something that will replace the human intellect. One needs to make it clear from the very beginning that AI, ML, and robotics coming together to provide assistance in healthcare, be it neurorehabilitation, be it diagnosis, be it end-of-life care. It is only about augmenting the capabilities and efficiencies of the human healthcare worker. Like, let me give you a simple example to bring home the point. You do an MRI. You have AI tools which recognize what are the things not in order in that MRI, because you have a deep learning system which have been trained to look at normal MRIs, and moment it sees an abnormal, it picks up. But then it is the radiologist sitting in front of the MRI machine who has to really understand what the machine is telling it and really make a sense of the readings of the machine. Otherwise, we will end up having wrong diagnosis, because if thus that was not an aberration, but just that was not an abnormality, just an aberration of the general public. The training of the MRIs that he has been given, he has not seen such a one before and pointed it out as wrong, would have come out. Like, very few people have their heart on the right side. All of us have in the left. If you have an X-ray machine trained to look for heart, and you have only trained it for all the normal people who have it on the left, moment it says a heart on the right, it will jump as something abnormal. But then a human being needs to decide and look at that, which is rare but a possibility. And such rare cases are not covered. So strategies really need to be further evaluated. And we need to really look at how we integrate into clinical practice. My take on this would be to involve clinicians from the very beginning in any robotics, artificial intelligence systems that you need to really develop. Rehabilitation robots that I was talking of, even if I have shown them doing a lot of beautiful things, they need to be augmented with high-level decision making. They need to be really cognitively enabled so that they can operate more autonomously. Now, this idea needs to be taken forward. We can combine novel AI methods and better computational models. People can really understand that there are systems in place which have made it possible to leverage the advantage of rehabilitation robots that could possibly lead to their wider adaptation in different settings. But one thing that we must really remember is the fact that yes, even if what is happening, something is happening. It is going smaller and bigger. Okay, maybe the leg. Okay, so one thing that needs to be clear and needs to be really understood is the fact that even if AI, robotics, and ML have moved out from science fiction, we have a long way to go before it becomes a part of our daily life, the way we operate and live. And for that to happen, we as engineers and educators have a huge role to play, wherein we look for real implementation, okay? But that implementation needs to be in terms of not only a hype that is being created that AI can solve anything and everything. So I end my talk by giving you the ABC. Yes, Dr. Deepa, are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
So
sir.
that's it. Any questions I can take? Otherwise, I am stopping my presentation.
Sir, there are a few questions.
Great.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for a very informative session. So we will share the questions now. So there's a question from Raghavan, sir. Is there any hospital in India where robotics is used in healthcare engineering?
Is there any hospital where robotics is used in healthcare engineering? Yes, of course. There are many hospitals, including AIIMS New Delhi, who has robotic surgeons. Urology department in AIIMS uses robotic surgeons. Amrita in the south has robotic surgeons. There are many robotic surgeons, around 33 or 34, or as of 2017-18. But my worry is, out of this, many of them are also for cosmetic surgery. And that is where the worry is. If you really go for cosmetic surgery under a robot, then the very purpose of bringing robotics is lost. Because what it then does is take away the advantage of really having very thin slices of the kidney that humans cannot do, being done by robot to save someone from cancer. And if you then dilute it out by bringing in robots for cosmetic surgery, I think it does not serve the purpose. So yes, there are hospitals in India where robots are used in hand surgery. You have Amrita, you have AIMS New Delhi, you have a couple of hospitals in Bombay, but a few of them is about cosmetic surgery, which is my worry. Hyderabad is about spinal surgery. So there are robots in Hyderabad hospitals where spinal surgery is done. So these are complex surgeries to be done with the help of a robot. The only difficulty in Indian context for a robotic surgery is that the cost of consumables is like 80 to 90,000, the cost of consumables. And that is something which deters robotic surgeons and for small cities and towns. Yes. So what is the difference between robot assisted surgery and computer assisted surgery? Okay, brilliant question. What is the difference between robot assisted surgery and computer assisted surgery? Let me take you through the history of surgery. Middle Ages, the barber was the surgeon in the village. Then in the 12th century BC, 12th century, the Islamic school of brain surgery was established. Possibly that was the first notation of surgery becoming formal. And then came antibiotics, antiseptics, and then came anesthetics, and slowly surgery progressed when robotics made it possible for people to have surgery without making a complete cut. So people had what we call laparoscopic surgeries, holes and making surgeries. But then with the progress in computers, what it brought is the possibility of doing surgery in a virtual environment before you do the complete surgery yourself. So computer assisted surgery is about running a surgery using multimodal data integration in a virtual world, either online for the robot to carry it for the person to carry it forward, or to have a look at the complexities in that virtual world before performing the surgery. Whereas robot surgery is, the surgery is performed not by the surgeon, but the robot itself, and that's the difference. Computer assisted surgery is first on a virtual world, no doubt, but finally performed by the surgeon, including in everything being done. Robot assisted surgery, the surgeon is only at the panel which controls the robot. Okay, I should have given you a figure there with the robot actually doing the surgery. And this makes it possible to really do the whole surgery in a way that you can also think of micro, nano, or scales in which you could operate. Okay, but then this has many other issues. You must calibrate your patient vis-a-vis the robot workstation and very, very accurately. Otherwise, you'll miss this nano, micro scale readings that you are talking of. But the difference is the surgery there is a robot rather than a surgeon. Okay, and that makes it a huge lot different. Which control methodology can be used to reduce, eliminate hand tremors by using a robotic assistant? This is something which is very close to my heart, because hand tremors that results from Parkinsonism is one thing that can be actually lowered by using very passive weights. But all you need to do is look at the correct amount of tremor suppression mechanisms. So you could build, there is a lot of literature about tremor suppression for Parkinsonisms, and you do not need a complete robotic assistance to do it. All you need is a robotic mechanism with some passive weights and triggers, so that as tremor comes, the impedance and increases. Okay, and as it dies out, the hand is made freer. So these type of things are already available, and you can look up literature. Just look for tremor suppression in Parkinsonism, and that is done by not a complete robotic assistant, but just a robotic mechanism. Okay, a mechanism, and that you put in place. Can surgery robotic systems become completely autonomous? This is something that is being debated. Can surgery robotic systems become completely autonomous? In order to answer that question, let me take you still further to this surgery story that I was telling, with the barber being the surgeon first, and then we having surgeons cutting out, then we not being satisfied with the cut and bringing in laparoscopic surgery. Now people are not thinking of even making holes on your body to have a surgery. They are talking of natural orifices being used to send robots in, control these robots using a wireless network, a body area wireless network. Okay, instead of a large area network or a wide area network, you'll have a body area wireless network in which a wireless robot would be sent through your natural orifices to go inside, do the surgery, get it loaded itself, and send the debris, if you want that term to be used for your own body parts, the debris to be sent out through the natural orifices back until it unloads completely and then coming out. So that is what is the future of surgery. Hope it excites you to take up surgical robotics as your next thing to look up in your STTPs. Thank you very much, Deepa. I have exhausted all the questions possibly. Or is there
Thank
more
you so much,
questions?
sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So there are no more questions. So with this, we are winding up the session. A general reminder to the participants: e-certificate will be issued to those participants who have attended all the sessions, completed the feedback of all sessions, and qualify in the test. An online test will be conducted today at 7:30 p.m. sharp. Please check the WhatsApp group regarding the online test by 7:25 p.m. Also, please submit the overall feedback form for AICTE along with the test. Thank you very much, sir, for a very informative session. So the next session is scheduled at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will take your leave. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.